Elbow Experience. This is your host, Axel Dragon. I'm sitting here with WWE Hall of Famer bushwhacker Luke Williams, the icon, the legend himself, and we are getting ready to pick up on Chapter 3 of his iconic story.
Yeah, it's great to be with you again, Axel, and hi to everybody out there. Well, I arrive in Memphis, and it's owned by Jerry Jarrett. A big territory. You know, it runs from Kentucky, Tennessee, and it goes a bit of south into Mississippi. Long miles, long road trips. And up in the northeast end, there's the Poffos running ICW, and they're running out of Lexington in Kentucky. We go up in Kentucky. We were doing Louisville every Tuesday night, and I guess the territory ICW was running around Lexington. They had some great talent, you know, Bob Roop, Hands of Steel, Ronnie Garvin, and the Poffos, of course. And of course Rip Rogers was starting there. They had some great workers there. Bob Orton Jr. Anyhow, back in Jarrett's territory. Of course, King is the main guy there. King Jerry Lawler, Bill Dundee, Dutch Mantell, and the list of talent goes on and on. Anyhow, and we first came in there, and this is where we got a really big kickstart. The first week on television, they fed talent to us, and we didn't even get in the ring. We killed them off as they came in. The following week, not the general manager, but what is the name? The commissioner. The commissioner was Eddie Marlin. He was Jerry Jarrett's father-in-law. He came up into the ring and he says about our wrestling schools. Every time we were working against people, we weren't letting them get in the ring. We were beating them up with our flagpole before they got there. You know, so we're getting DQ'd. So he got in the ring this night and started laying the law out to us. And we dragged him in and we did a number on him. There was a lot of blood. And the studio in Memphis, I think it's Channel 4, it's right on Main Street. They had the ambulance come, carry him out on a stretcher, and took him to hospital as a shoot. And that was the start of the following week. They came up on the television, and they said that we were banned from the Memphis wrestling. That was the AWA territory. We were banned, and that's when I think it was Lawler got up and he said, "Hey, that's not the way to get rid of them. Let me and Billy Dundee kick their ass out of the territory." Hence, our first angles, our first feud started against Bill Dundee and Jerry Lawler right off the bat.
How was Jerry Lawler? I mean, is he a decent guy, or?
Yes, he was. And a hell of a ring.
I hear mixed stories about Jerry. That's why I was always wondering.
There's a lot of stories out there because he was the promoter. He became the major promoter there, but he was a booker. And of course, everybody has dirt stories about bookers because they have to get rid of talent and hire new talent. You know, you can't have in territories those days. A good run was a year. The middle of the card guys or the early matches, you turned them over twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year, because you're burning them out. So you had to keep getting fresh guys in to keep the guys getting to the next level to get to the main level. You know what I mean?
Right.
And of course, you get all those stories because guys get fired and they don't want to be fired. You know what I mean?
Right.
So anyhow, we had our run with them, and then the next feud started with the Fabulous Ones. The Fabulous Ones feud went for maybe 8 months.
Was Jim Cornette managing them then?
That was Steve Curran and Stan Lane.
Right. Was Jim Cornette their manager then?
Beg your pardon?
I said, was Jim Cornette their manager then?
No. He wasn't their manager. They didn't have one. Jim Cornette was in the. He had started that year as a manager, and he was managing Adrian, the gorgeous George guy from England.
Adonis.
No. Adrian Adonis is an American. Adrian Street.
Okay, yeah.
A well-known. Adrian wasn't a tall guy, 5'7" and about 210 pounds, but he was from a wrestling school in England called Wigan, and all the top guys come from Wigan. And here's this little guy with a fag gimmick coming from there. If you see people from Wigan in the 60s and 70s and 60s, they've all got buckled noses and cauliflower ears.
Right.
And he had made a name for himself in England and in Europe, and he was over in the States. Very, very talented guy. Very talented. Wrote his own music. Was an artist. Painted and that, and just talented. Very talented. And of course, he worked as a fag, but he was an anti-fag. Anyhow, Jim Cornette was managing him and Jesse Barr. Jesse Barr, who was from Oregon. This was his early years in wrestling. He had left Oregon. He started in Oregon, 79, Jerry Barr. And I think this was his second territory or third territory. He was an actual American up in Oregon, amateur wrestling. So Jim was managing him. His main guy was, though, Adrian Street.
Gotcha.
Adrian Street became a big name over the next few years in the States. Anyhow, our feud went for the Fantastics. It went on so long. It went right through to most of our stay there. We went from gimmick matches into singles into tags. At the time, Butch was back in New Zealand, and I had Jonathan Boyd, the ex-Royal Kangaroo, as my partner.
Right.
He was from Australia, and he joined me, and we were called the Sheep Herders. The part 2 of the Sheep Herders, and we caused havoc there. We had so many sellouts. It was a great run where they had the fabulous one. Jerry Jarrett made some incredible music videos. Well, Jerry Law and Jarrett made these incredible music videos. Using that 3-man band from Texas, ZZ Top. A lot of music, and they did. The old car with the girls in it and all that. Well, they did all that fabulous ones. They were young and good looking, and they drew all the girls forced the boyfriends to come, and we did a lot of bloody matches all over the territory.
Right.
Anyhow, the run came to the end. Jerry Jarrett was away at the time. I don't know whether many people know about this. He was away on holiday, and the TV contract came up. That weekend it came up. Jerry Lawler signed it with one of the announcers. Signed the contract with one of the announcers. In Jerry's mind, he had a crew sitting in Mississippi ready to come in for a takeover. Jerry got the message, flew back home, and hence Jerry Lawler got a third of the whole territory. At the time, he was only partnered in Memphis with Jerry Jarrett. But after this situation, he got part of the whole territory. I'm not sure what it was, a third or whatever.
Gotcha.
he took over, and I was brought in by Jerry Jarrett and Bill Dundee. When this situation happened, Lawler had his own crew sitting in Mississippi. He got rid of most of the guys who were in there, except the fabulous ones, of course, and the people who lived in Memphis. And he brought his own crew in. Hence, it was bye-bye to me and Jonathan.
Wow.
But we had one hell of a run there. And I'll say about Jerry Jarrett, I got run down to one part of it, and I was out for about 4 or 5 days, or maybe a week, and Jarrett paid me the same money that I was making when we were selling out. He paid me. Not many promoters do that. So I'll always say that about Jerry Jarrett. I still speak to him, about twice a year to this day. And that was around 81.
That's cool.
The fabulous ones got their start because they had Jack Fargo in the corner, and he was well known in the South. The Fargos were well known in the South.
Right.
And when they put them in together, he was in their corner, and everybody knew them, and that's how the fabulous ones got a kickstart. Yeah, so that was that. So we moved on after that, and I think we moved from that. The Welshes owned the Welshes were the Fullers, and they owned all the South, say half of the South in the 60s and 70s, and part of the 80s, and of course the Jarretts were related to the Welshes, and that so we moved on to Continental Wrestling then, which was the Fullers. Ron and Robert Fuller.
Right.
And that was based out of Pensacola. So we started working for them. And that was a smaller territory then. In AWA, Tennessee, for Jarrett, we were doing about 3,500 miles a week on the road. That was a hard territory. All of a sudden, we're living in Pensacola. Every trip was about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour every night. If that, the longest trip was to Birmingham. And I guess that was 200, two and a quarter. That was about 2.5 hour trip, 3 hour trip going to Birmingham. And of course, we feuded with while we were there. I think I've talked about this before. You check it out. While we were there, we worked against Ron and Robert Fuller and Golden, who was related to them, who's a nephew. So Robert was with Jimmy Golden, and then Robert would go away for half a year or a year, and then Ron would come into book, and Jimmy Golden would be with him. And of course, Bob Armstrong was there with Brad Armstrong, God bless his soul, and we worked with them a lot too. They were great team to work with, and that TV was taped every Saturday night in peanut capital of the world, Dothan, Alabama. The old Dothan, Alabama had a dirt floor. The place used to pack out every Saturday night for the teams. We used to we used to tape there on Saturday morning in the studio in Dothan, and that night would run Dothan. The rest of the territory would be a week later because it would take me bicycle around the territory.
Gotcha.
Anyhow, one instance, Honky Tonk Man was there with us for quite a while, and he was known as Punk Rock Wayne Farris. Just remember this story. He got a brand new Cadillac sedan DeVille. It was that champagne pink. And this night we drove up to Birmingham. This was in the winter. He was working with one of the Fullers, and we were working with, I think, the other guy, Bunkhouse Buck. He was the one who was rated. Jimmy Golden was Bunkhouse Buck, and we're working with Robert, either Ron or Robert, and Honky was working with the other one, and we did a tag. That night we had a riot there. And we did some angle that we cuffed one of the corner posts, and we started beating up the other one, and then Ron, the other fella, came to the save, and that then Honky came on top of them, and we left them all laying there for an angle, a hot angle for the following week.
Right.
When we went to leave that night, instead of the people dispersing and going home, they were all at the back of the arena waiting for us to come out the back door.
Mm-hmm.
And you were in Honky's new Cadillac sedan, and they had smashed out the front windshield, or front windscreen, what you call it, and the back one. And this was in the middle of winter. We had to wait till we sat in that building till no one was out the back. We had waited about 45 to an hour after the match, and we went out of the car, and I said, Honky, leave your car here, because we had friends up in that town who were well known. And we said, leave your car here, and they'll get to stop with it. And Honky said, no, we're taking it back to Pensacola. So we drove that night in the winter with no front windscreen, with that fucking icy wind blowing in, drinking whiskey, and fucking wrapped up to the hilt. Boy, that was a miserable three and a quarter hours we ever had driving down that 65 towards Mobile, then across.
Wow.
Well, that was like, we still remember that. His new pink, brand new car it was, a brand new year, with 81 or 82.
Uh-huh.
I can't remember what year it was, but around there. And that, anyhow, the good part about it, the next week we came back to Birmingham, the place was sold out. I guess we come back in my car. We used to have turns taking our cars. Anyhow, the big arena, and I'm trying to think of it now, it's a well-known one. It's still there. And that it was that. Boutwell Auditorium in Birmingham.
Right.
That was Monday. That was Birmingham. Tuesday was down in right at the bottom of on the water. To get to town, and then it was a good little territory, because I remember Tuesday was only 45-minute drive to the town across the bottom there. Wednesday was another about an hour and a quarter, hour and a half. Everything was short trips. You're home by midnight, 11 o'clock every night.
Well, that's good.
And I lived with a well-known guy at the time, Joe LeDuc. Big Joe LeDuc, and he was wild.
Right.
Yeah. Those were the good old days. And the Freebirds were in there at the time, but they weren't actually known working as a tag team. There was Gordy and Michael Hayes. Joe LeDuc's the van was called the Starship Enterprise. And we used to go up the motorway up to Birmingham, or come home after the show up to Birmingham. Joe LeDuc would have a bottle of tequila in one hand and a bottle of blackjack in the other hand. He'd be driving it, he'd have a sip on the tequila and a sip on the blackjack, and take a few painkillers. And we used to go down off the highway, down to the ditch, and that was a wide ditch. It was about 20 yards. Go up on the other side, along where the traffic was going the opposite way, then come back down in the ditch and go back on the right side. And it was unreal. It was freaky.
Right.
Driving with a bottle and drinking, and you'd be out of it and go down the ditch, go up the other side of the road. Hey, we were crazy in those days, That was around 81. Those were the days of Quaaludes, mate. That's what it was, Quaaludes. And he'd drop a few Quaaludes and pour the old tequila on it. In the blackjack.
When I was ripping and running in the business, I wasn't drinking tequila, but I was eating painkillers and Xanaxes and cocaine, and drinking all at the same time, And
Yeah.
I think it's the life of a pro wrestler. Like that's one of our.
Those days we took, we did a lot of territory. You did so many miles on the road that you took speed to keep you going. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
you want to get to the gym every morning, and then you had like the Crockett's territory, NWA, 3,500 miles. Bill Watts' territory, 3,500 miles a week. So you had to keep going. And at night time, you took Xanax or Valium. Now, this is the problem today. That's why there's so many deaths in the last 20 years. Instead of taking a mind drug to relax, they take a muscle relaxer.
Right.
You know what I mean? And the muscle relaxers, after taking speed and speeding up, and then take somas, you put the brakes on your heart, and that's why the guys, they say, had a heart attack or the heart exploded, because you're taking soma as a muscle relaxer, and your heart's the muscle.
Right.
It's sad those times. We never did that sort of stuff. And I can say I never took muscle relaxers. I couldn't take somas. I never liked them. I took them once and I didn't like it. Yeah, so that was that little territory. The Dolphin, we used to do TV there, and it was a great little territory. It was always hot. You know what I mean? The territory was hot all the time. The Fullers had great minds, and of course Bob Armstrong. He was the office through there, and he was a great mind. Bob is still alive. He was ring up to a year or so ago, 2 years. He's going to be 75, 76 now.
Right.
I see they've got rid of his kids or one of his kids when this pandemic. There was 2 kids working WWF, and I think they got rid of one of them.
Yeah, I think the one that used to call Road Dog. Yeah, Brian. Brian's still there, I think.
Yeah, the other one was the referee.
Yeah, the referee is gone, but Road Dog is still there.
Yeah, I remember when Road Dog was over in the Gulf War, in the Gulf War in 91 or 92. And then I remember when he came back, we were in a hotel up in Washington, because I think he was what was he now? A Navy, not a Navy SEAL, the other guys in the Gulf War. He was crazy. When he come back, he was partying with us at a hotel. He was still in uniform, from the war and that. And we were partying there. There was Hawk and the Road Warriors, me and a few others. And that night, they got drunk, and Hawk and him were walking around the bar on the tabletops from one tabletop to the other. All the customers were drinking. They were so drunk, and they ran around the tabletops. No one would stop them. When Hawk was running wild, he was wild.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I was watching the Dark Side of the Ring, the after show or whatever, and I seen you on there.
Yeah, last night, yeah. Because I just think the Hawk show was the week before. Did you see that?
Yeah. I watched the one last night for Owen. That was sad. That had me choked up a little.
I know in that family since in the 70s, early 70s, mate. That was tearjerker, mate. Really sad. But Hawk stories, I had so many Hawk stories, but some of them were too hot to use on that show.
That's all right. Here on the Collar and Elbow Experience, we're going to sit down one day, just me and you, and I'll let you tell all those stories.
Yeah. Anyhow, that was the end of the territory. It was called Continental, and the office was in Pensacola. That was a beautiful. And Joe and me had a home on the water. Joe the Duke and me had a home on the water, and there were no homes around us. The next home was about 100 yards away either side. So we had many a party in that place.
And now, is this the same house you were talking about on Dark Side of the Ring?
No, that was the home that I had on the beach in the 90s. We're talking about the early 80s now.
Okay.
You know, I had that home from the late 80s. I had a condo on the beach till the 202.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was another period of my life. That was a crazy time then, because I'd finished in WWE. Anyhow, getting back to this part of the story, I think we moved on to did I talk about I just finished talking about for Jarrett's territory. After that, that's when we moved to Texas, and Texas. Tully was the booker, Blanchard was the booker there. Everybody had left, and Texas was on its fucking ass. Arenas were empty. It was scary. We come in there, and I remember, those days you get paid by the town. I think some towns I was driving 3 hours to, and I made $25.
Jesus, I've been there. I know how that feels.
In Texas at the time, there was 3 territories. Out of San Antonio, the Southwest Championship Territory. Out of Dallas, there was World Class Wrestling. That was the Von Erichs. Then out of Amarillo was it was originally the Funks, and then Murdoch and Blackjack Mulligan took over.
Mm-hmm.
So there were 3 territories running in the state of Texas, because Texas is a big state.
Yeah, it is.
And every sign out in the country is full of bullet holes. As soon as you get to the city, every sign is full of bullet holes. They say every home has got 3 guns. The average home has got 3 guns.
I believe it.
Yeah, so we started in Texas, and it was down on its ass. And I think it was the second week we won the belts. They put the belts on us. They heard about how we drew in these other territories straight away. They put the belts on us straight away, and then we did an egg. Butch was with me. Jonathan Boyd was with me, and we were there about 6 weeks, and we're getting to set up the big angle. Every territory, what we did was we came in for 4 to 6 weeks, knocked the state of that. Then we did a promo in the toilet over a sitter, where you sit down to food, and we'd have the New Zealand flag, and we'd have the map of the state, and would say we've this what we think of. We'd knock the state, and then we'd say this is what we think of this state, and we'd push it down the toilet with the New Zealand flag and flush it. And we'd say this is the latrine of North America. If it's Texas or Tennessee or whatever state we were in, we'd do that same promo, and that because there was no cable TV at the time.
Right. Yeah.
So we did that there, and then Joe Blanchard came out on television, and Joe had a fucked hip. He dragged one side of his body. Joe Blanchard was a great wrestler back in the 60s, 50s, and 60s. He opened up this territory in the 70s, and he dragged, he limped over one side and dragged his hip. He needed a hip replacement.
Mm-hmm.
And after the situation, we did the urinal thing. Well, the day we were supposed to do it, the night before, my partner, after the show in Austin, Texas, got drunk, took a few sleeping pills, hopped in his car, and went to go around the corner, and he didn't go around the corner, went straight to a post, broke all his hip, his leg, and was in a body, and he was put in a body cast.
Oh my!
He was put in a body cast. So I had to work separate and that. So we prolonged the angle with the urinal of the toilet and that. And I did something with Bobby Jaggers, where I brought the flag in, powdered him, and brought the flagpole in, and started busting his arm. Joe Blanchard come to the ringside and started screaming, and then says, you've gone overboard in the territory, blah, blah, blah. So I dragged them in, and I knocked him down, and I jumped up on the top rope with a coal miner's glove and come down on his arm or down on his hip, and he, of course, we did the same thing. The ambulance, he was carried out. Tommy ran into the ring, ran me out of the ring, and hence we got the territory on fire. After that, because Joe was the promoter of the territory, and he was a cripple, so-called cripple, and that got a lot of sympathy, and the people were up and and Tully did a good hell of a promo, and bang, we're on fire. And I started going around with Tully in single matches all around the territory. We worked a series of matches, and in no DQ matches, we built up to barbed wire matches over a period of a couple of months, 6 weeks, and then I got Butch to come back in, and we went, and he ran in with me with Tully was beating me up, and Butch came back into the territory. No one knew, and hence we started tag matches, and Tully, my other baby face in the territory was Dick Murdoch. Captain Redneck on TBS.
Right.
Remember Dick Murdoch, Captain Redneck on TBS? He's a Texan, and a real Texan. Tobacco chewing, beer sucking redneck. And him and Tully went as partners, hence we started going around the territory with that, and doing great business. They were, you got to know all Americans. Tully was a great football player. He his arm and that, but he was a quarterback for one of the main colleges in Texas, A&M, or one of them. He was well known in Texas. And he was over as a wrestler, of course, his dad owning a company. But you don't have that's why it was flat before, because he had no one over there. And so we came in and we did the angle and blah blah blah, and now we're in tags with Butch back, and we had the place on fire. And then the situation happened where Tully effed up, and Manny Fernandez came in with Dick Murdoch. So I've got a Mexican, which we've got a San Antonio, the mayor of San Antonio is the you know what I mean? Got Manny Fernandez, and I got Captain Redneck. So I got a great tag team for Texas. And we had a hell of a run with them. One hell of a run. And that was my life, and that was my run in Texas. One thing at the end, I had a team underneath me called the Blondes, was Eric Emery and Dan somebody. And I should have turned babyface on them, because I built this team up so good. I was a booker there. I built this team up so good that they were a hot team to take over my spot as heels. And this was one thing I never did there. I got the offer of a job in Puerto Rico as the booker to come down for WWC, Carlos Colon, and my final 2 months, I should have turned babyface against them and got them to do something to us and that. But post, you always talk about it in post, what you could have done, but I never did it. And I lost out on a good run there as baby faces.
Right.
But that was a run there. A lot of road stories there. A lot of road stories. One night we're running to Austin, a township out of Austin. Austin was an hour away, 45 minutes to an hour. Many times we had to leave the building in Austin. The police had to come in and put us in a police car and drive us out. We had so much heat at the end of the match that they'd have to put us in a police car and drive someone else to drive our car down the road. There's those rednecks there, and they've all got rifles on the back of their pickups. You know what I mean?
Right.
They had to take us out of town to get going. Boy, the people were hot in Austin, really hot.
Right.
You know, and a few times we had, Mil Mascaras come into Austin and work there, an automatic sellout. The guy, the guy from New York. He's from there. I can't think of him now. He was big in New York. Ivan Putski.
Right.
Ivan Putski. He was from Austin, and we had brought him in there many times. Instant sellout. Like he knocked me out too with his heart. What he used to do, hit you with a heart thing. Boy, he clipped my chin one night, knocked me fucking right out when he covered me. It came through about a minute after the covered. I was seeing stars there. He throw you to the ropes and come with that axe. The Polish axe it was.
Mm-hmm.
Right to the chin. But we had some great times in that place, getting out of the buildings. We took our own vehicle, all the tires would be slapped. And that one night, we're running to a town past Austin. On the way to it, we saw these Brahmas were let out wild. Brahma bulls, how big they are?
Right, yeah.
They're big bastards. And that we're running, and they were on the side of the road. There's a herd, a small herd, about four or five of them, the side of the road. And this was in the daylight, about 4 o'clock. They were grazing, there was no fence there, and they were grazing there. Now, on the way back, the farmer who hadn't even come and taken them in, on the way back, we're running 70 or 80. Manny Fernandez was in the car in front of us. They were all Latinos. Carlos Colon from Puerto Rico was in the car, and there was another couple of Latins in the car. One more Spanish guy, Manny Fernandez was driving. It was 4 Latinos in the car. Al Perez. They hit they would come around a bend, and they hit the bull. The bull was 1,900 pounds. The bloody engine went up underneath, and the rest of the guys got out of the car. Manny was frozen behind the driver's seat. We actually we were chasing them, at 70 or 80 miles, and they're only 2-lane road, one lane each way through the country. No traffic there. So when we came up, we missed the female, by a couple of feet, and we pulled up, and Butch went over, and Manny was screaming because he thought the engine moved back towards him, but Butch dragged him out of the car. He thought his legs were broken. He was just shocked hitting that bull at 80 miles an hour. We had to dial, the bull's laying in the road. His legs are broken, but he's still kicking. But they're broken. The front legs are broken. You know what I mean? And he's going yanking like that. So we have to call up. There's no cell phones those days. So I had to go to someone came along and called and stopped and that. And we told him, if you pass gentlemen, can you call the police? We had to wait there because Manny's car was fucked. And it was a rental car. The police come. We explained it to him what happened, and he went over to the Brahma and he had to shoot it in the head. And he says, "I'll contact the farmer and that." Now he had to, because Manny was in the accident, he had to take Manny's credentials, and of course they had a computer in their car those days. He went in on the computer, pulled it up, and they had a warrant out for Manny. Had a warrant. So they grabbed Manny and he put him in cufflinks and took him away.
Wow.
Police station. We all had to follow him. Of course, we had to bail him out. We had to raise money there at the police station. It was about their carload. There was 4 in their carload and 4 in my carload. We raised the money for the bail, and of course, raise the money so we could bring him out. And of course, Joe Blanchard, the promoter, was a bailiff. So he took care of it when we got back to San Antonio. He rang the people up in Austin and got it all handled. So because they took Manny, and Manny was in jail, put in jail for a warrant that was up for a year or so. Crazy, huh? Those are the days in San Antonio. I remember us coming in the first week too, and a well-known wrestler in the South, and that our initiation, we had a rental car, and I think it was a Ford, big Ford Main. What's the big Ford Lincoln? And that, remember the H thing on the hood, the thing like that, the bar in the middle, little sits on the front above the radiator.
Yeah.
Highway right above, coming into San Antonio. And there's highways underneath me. There's crossways were up layered. And one of the guys all of a sudden driving along, and we hear a bang. And I look at the front of the car. I get a shock and that. And the fucking thing on the front of the car goes like that. One of the boys was driving, and he pulled out a rifle, I guess, and he put the beam on the thing and hit it. That was my initiation into fucking. That was a shock. I nearly hit the rail on the on the ramp. That was scary. Yeah. I can't think of one of the boys that did that, but that was my initiation. The first week I came into Texas. And we used to go on the road to Odessa, mate. The Odessa was 350 miles. They'd come and pick you up 2.5 hours before the show for 350 miles. 3 hours before the show. They're driving 100 miles all the way because you're out in the desert. They're usually in a Lincoln or a Cadillac with a roof, the sunroof. And in the front, they'd have the boys that have their wrestling gear, but the bag with the most of them was the ammunition bag. There'd be a 308 or 300 rifle, and Uzis and M16, and they're all set. So you pull the trigger and they'd be automatic. The guy had already fixed them all. And on the way back, they'd just be firing at everything. That's how they got their. That's how they spent their time on a 300-mile trip. The jackrabbits on the way back, the jackrabbits were like small deer. They stood about up to 3 feet off the road. Texas, and they bring out an Uzi out the window and go. They would all be on the warm road at night. The jackrabbits would be all on the side of the road, and they just mow them all down as they drive along the road.
Wow.
It was another experience those days. Coke and guns.
Coke and guns.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a title for a story. Coke and guns.
Yeah, so that's how it was, mate. Texas, Coke and guns.
Now, when you were in Texas, did you ever get to work with Bruiser Brody?
Bruiser Brody worked for. No, he worked for me. I was the booker there for Joe Blanchard, and he worked for me. He was a big. Abdullah was a good friend of mine since the 70s. 70s, because I was with him, and he'd been in New Zealand in the 60s, and I'd been in, and when I was in Stu House territory in 72, 73, and that he was in that territory too. So I'd bring Abdullah in to work with Brody. We do a hot angle in the little place where the office was. There was a little studio called the Junction, and we'd do all the wrestling angles there, and then we'd run them around the territory. It was bicycle, of course, and I'd run Abdullah and Brody, and that it was always them on top, me and Butch against Manny Fernandez and Dick Murdoch. Those were the cards, the main two matches. And we always had another 2 angles underneath it. But Abby and Bruiser ran with me there, and then ran with me, of course, in Puerto Rico. those were the days. He lived, Frank lived 30 miles out of San Antonio, and Barbara, his wife, is from New Zealand. Frank met her in Australia, but she was from New Zealand. And I still keep contact with her today.
Yeah, I loved Brody. I got some of his stuff, like, on VHS back when, tapes were the thing.
Frank was the machine, mate. Frank came out of that dressing room swinging that chain, and that he just was the machine. There was no stopping him. Him and Abdullah made the biggest money over in Japan. Him and Abdullah.
It's just sad what happened to Brody.
Yeah, it was sad. It was sad. We'll get to that later. But the Brody drew a lot of money for me in Texas. The only trouble is, though, he'd do an angle in my territory, go up to Minneapolis, do an angle for Vern, and then he would go over to St. Louis and do an angle there, and then he'd play, and then you'd book him for the tour to run him around the territory for it. Each one would book him, and if the other, he'd play one promoter against the other. This was Frank. He'd play one and he'd go for the guy that offered him the most money. He killed me one time because we're going down to do Weslaco. That's down in the valley. The valley is the bottom of Texas. Over where Weslaco and all those little towns along the bottom there. You go over the border, it's Matamoros, and it's Mexico. But these towns, it's only 10 miles and you're over the border. From the southern part of Texas and we had the towns all booked up and that, sellouts and all that, and Frank ran with some other, with Vern off in it. Well, Vern had more big towns. He ran with Vern and he killed all those towns for me down there. It was hard to get the people back because we promoted them and built them up, and it was a no-show. And they were all Texas, they were all Mexican towns. All the fruit pickers and all that come across the border to do all the to work across the border. Mexican crowds. Hey, can you put this on hold? Put this on hold.
We can go ahead and we can go ahead and wrap up now, Luke, and we'll pick up next time because it's already been over almost an hour. So you want to?
Okay, mate.
All right. Well, Luke, it was great talking to you.
Cut that piece out where I wanted to go for a slash. You cut back and close it. You cut that bullshit out after the Brody story and go straight to the close.
All right.
Okay, mate.
All right, we can definitely do that. Like I said, it was great talking to you. Yeah. We're gonna bring you back in so you can finish telling your story. It's always been a pleasure every time I get to talk to you.
I got it, yeah. Okay, matey.
All right, buddy. Happy birthday.
Great to be on Collar and Elbow, mate.
Thanks. We love having you here.
You stole that from a friend of mine. The Head.
Oh.
His T-shirts, Collar and Elbow.
Well, actually, how that got started is I was trying to come up with a name for a good show that explained pro wrestling, like the pro wrestling that I love. And I was like, I took, when I first got into the business, first thing you had to learn was how to tie up the collar and the elbow.
I gotta go for a piss badly, mate.
All right. Well, it's good talking to you, Luke. We will see you next time, buddy.
Thank you, mate. Bye-bye.
See ya.